Now,
Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you all are joining us today. We are going to get started. I know we had you in the waiting room a few minutes longer. We appreciate your patience. I'm Jocelyn Travis, chair of the Ohio Equity Team. And right now we are in the process of doing our environmental justice series for the Ohio Equity Team. Our theme is how equity relates to environmental justice and climate resilience. The Equity Team is a committee of the Ohio Energy Table, and we're funded by the REAMP Network. Our goal and commitment is to engage more people in the environmental movement, environmental and climate justice movement in Ohio. And so this is how we're doing it. We're just very excited today to have a special session on why Ohio needs the Energy Jobs and Justice Act. So I will pass the mic to our team member, Tracy Sabetta, who will introduce today's speakers.
Thank you, Jocelyn, and thanks to everyone else for joining us today. As Jocelyn mentioned, I'm Tracy Sabetta with Moms Clean Air Force in Ohio, and I'm also a member of the Ohio Equity Team. And it is my pleasure today to introduce our speakers, the lead co-sponsors of House Bill 429, the Energy Jobs and Justice Act. Moms Clean Air Force is a supporter of House Bill 429. It's a comprehensive, equitable, clean energy policy designed to work for all Ohioans. And joining us today to give you some more information are bill sponsors, Representatives Juanita, Brent, and Casey Weinstein. Representative Brent is in her second term as a legislator and is honored to represent the people of District 12, which includes Mayfield Heights, Maple Heights, and Beechwood. In the 133rd General Assembly, Representative Brent authored House Bill 285, the Established Driver's License Reinstatement Fee Debt Reduction Program. This bill became law in 2020 and now helps thousands of Ohioans have a pathway to removing suspended driver's licenses. Currently, she serves as ranking member of the Agriculture and Conservation Committee, while also sitting on the Transportation and Public Safety and Commerce and Labor Committees. In addition, she's the first vice president of the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus, which is the oldest Black caucus in the nation. But in all of these spaces, she works to introduce legislation that prioritizes justice and equity, including, my apologies there, including adult use cannabis, the Crown Act, creating a respectful and open world for natural hair, the Kinship Care Bill of Rights, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, Juneteenth as a paid holiday, and many more. Prior to becoming a legislator, Representative Brent sat on the board of trustees for the Harvard Community Services Center and the Lee Harvard Community Development Corporation. She brings this experience of building and organizing strong communities to her work in Columbus. In her free time, she enjoys visiting family and taking vacations by herself, which we're going to talk about later. It sounds like a good gig if you can get. Representative Weinstein has the honor of serving as the state rep for Ohio's 37th House District, currently containing Hudson, Stowe, and Twinsburg. He was first elected in 2018 and has championed veterans, young families, and renewable energy initiatives during his time in office. Casey's the immediate past ranking member on the Armed Services and Veterans Affairs Committee and is now the ranking Democrat on the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. Casey grew up in a military family and has lived all over the country, but is proud to call Ohio home. He's a 2004 graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy and served on active duty as Deputy Chief of Information Assurance at Space and Missile Systems Center in Los Angeles and is officer in charge of maintenance support at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton. In Dayton, he was recognized as a top 40 under 40 community leader and has more recently been recognized as one of the 30 for the future by the Greater Akron Chamber of Commerce. He was a member of the Leadership Hudson class of 2014 and led the class's successful project to fund and implement the Solar Training and Education Center at Barlow Community Center. He proudly served as a Hudson City Councilman from 2016 to 2019 before running for the Ohio House of Representatives. Casey's married to his Air Force Academy classmate Amanda, who is an economics professor at the University of Akron. They have 2 young daughters and a son, Nora, Amelia, and Brady. So now I will turn it over to the representatives to give us some background on the legislation and talk about why it's so important to them to be leading the charge. We will start with Representative Weinstein.
Thanks, Tracy. Thank you all for taking some time to, can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right, I got a warning, but it's not a mute warning. Classic, someone's gonna mute themselves. Like it's gonna happen. I am so happy to be here and really thank everybody for, taking a few minutes to listen to my friend and colleague, Rep. Brent, and I talk about this legislation. I just very briefly at a high level, we've been on defense for a long time with really bad policy in HB6, which is the governing policy, energy policy for Ohio today. And Rep. Brent and I, first Rep. House, and who has now moved on to Cleveland City Council, who's a tremendous advocate, and now have the honor of working with Rep. Brent on this, decided that we needed a forward-thinking future 21st century energy policy to talk about, and a framework for how this is being done right around the country, as opposed to just having to fight HB6. Now we have something, we have a model, we have a framework, we have an approach that works, that is equitable, that is modern, that takes best practices from across the country, that has had a lot of great input into it. So I'm really excited to talk today about it and just be on offense on this issue. Thank you. Do you want me to does Rep. Brent want to do a quick intro and then I can go into this, or how do you want me to go right into where we're at today?
I would just say, I'm really grateful to be working on this with Rep. Weinstein. I just like to say he's probably definitely one of my favorite people to work with. And he's also just happens to be my neighbor physically in the district, and also when it comes to our offices. But one thing that's been very consistent is that him being very concerned about the environment has made me level up about my concerns about environmental justice. And so I thank him for always being a champion and being consistent about this, because he's raised up the awareness of a lot of people at the State House of being this champion for all of us. And this affects everyone. So it's not just a those people issue, it's a us issue. So thank you so much for allowing us to present today.
Thank you, Rep. Brent. All right, so Tracy, I think we can go right into it. So I mentioned HB6 is still the policy, energy policy for Ohio. So, I mean, what does that boil down to? It's effectively a coal bailout, an efficiency killer, a renewable energy killer, and a corruption enabler. That's kind of that is the policy that we are operating under today. It was passed under the leadership of Larry Householder, who is now out of the House of Representatives and is awaiting a court date because of the dark money from utilities that he took to get this thing passed, and then allegedly misused those funds, and that's what he's going to court for. That's what he was kicked out of the Ohio House for. It took, of course, more than Householder to do this. There's allies that they had in the Senate and the governor, who staffed his administration with former coal lobbyists. The chief among them, Sam Randazzo, who took millions of dollars from First Energy as a bribe, came over to run PUCO under Governor DeWine, and then took the extraordinary step of lobbying for this legislation. So it came to be under corrupt and illegal circumstances, but it is still our policy because we haven't done really anything substantive to it in terms of repealing it or moving forward from it. So, I talked about a coal bailout. This is what this means. This is from the Ohio Consumer Council's web page. You can go there right now. If you Google Ohio Consumers Council, you will go to their website and see in real time the cost of this coal bailout. And yes, one of the coal plants is in Indiana, which is crazy. And we're not getting our power back from it too, which even blows my mind further. So, I visited the coal plant in Madison, Indiana, which is over an hour over the border, and was just shocked at, it was built in 1953. It's no longer competitive economically. It's highly polluting. And it is still going because of a bailout from Ohioans. So these subsidies are going out of state, when we can't even keep the power on here in Ohio. So it's incredibly frustrating corruption tax. So you can see Rep. Brent and I, who both opposed this bill and have worked toward repealing it, we need something to turn the page on this bad policy. So I think that covers us for this slide. Rep. Brent, would you want to add anything? Please feel free if there's. Yeah.
The bill itself, on a very basic level, was just a bad bill. And even when Rep. Weinstein and I had the opportunity to read the bill, it was so much outpour against the bill. I was surprised on how many people actually end up voting for the bill. And as legislators, our first obligation is to the people we represent, and our people at home were telling us no. And so I'm always from the place that if it's a bad policy and my people are telling me, there was no other choice but to vote no. And that's how I knew it was more to this story than meets the eye when it comes to this bill.
Yeah, one of my favorite stories about Rep. Brent is that she literally went to the front door of every one of her constituents who was employed at these plants to ask them their opinion on it, which I think is pretty amazing. That is amazing public service. She drove to their front door and asked them what they thought. And I believe they told her they did not support the bill. I think that's what you relayed to me, Rep. Brent.
Yes, so I think the lobbyist was trying to convince me that these people were going to lose their job. His worst mistake was that he gave me everyone's name. So when he gave me everyone's name, I just pulled up their addresses. I mean, it was just very simple, like, well, you're telling me they're going to lose their job. Let me go talk to them. And I just spent my Friday, Saturday, and Sunday while I was in district, going to people's homes, showing up to birthday parties, because one guy was having a birthday party. And before he cut his cake, I know, he was like, no, he was like, why are they lying to you? And so that's what I needed to hear to validate in my mind, because we were receiving crazy amounts of pressure from pastors, religious leaders, different community leaders, different union people. And I said, this legislation does not make sense. I have to go to the people that it first is going to affect, and that's the people who work there. Thank you for reminding me of that, Rick Weinstein.
That is one of my favorite stories ever. Like, forget Rep. Brent stories. That is just a fine public servant right there. That really is. We got to move forward, right? So that's what HB 429 is about. The Energy Jobs and Justice Act, with great branding and a great name and clean energy working for all Ohioans, which, clearly we've had policy that has not only not helped Ohioans, but disproportionately negatively impacted some Ohioans more than others. And that was a big, big part of this. So you can see some of the highlights here, that this bill puts Ohio on a path toward a more equitable clean energy future. It looks at and specifically targets those that have been disproportionately harmed, particularly in urban areas, where the impacts of climate change, the impacts of air quality are felt and exacerbated. So it's a massive economic development initiative, and that's such an important story about the massive growth in clean energy jobs and environmental justice programs that come with this. So it's a massive economic opportunity for Ohio to take advantage of. So that is at a high level what the Energy Jobs and Justice does. We can get into a little bit more details on that. I think we might have somebody that needs to mute themselves, hearing occasional screams and yells, please. Or maybe the host can mute folks. Okay, thank you, Gina Burke. Appreciate it. Okay, so what does this do? It restores our renewable energy standard and calls for a more aggressive carbon reduction plan. So you can see the numbers here, but where we want to get to is more in line with states that are taking a leadership role in this and getting to a hugely significant carbon reduction by the year 2050. And also Ohio had an immensely successful energy efficiency program, which unfortunately was killed by HB 6. This program, according to PUCO's own study, saved Ohioans billions and billions of dollars in unused energy, the cheapest energy, the energy that we don't have to use because of efficiency, which would come in really handy right now when demand is soaring because of these soaring temperatures. So it killed that really effective program. I used to have the numbers top of head, but it was many, many billions of dollars that were saved, and now that program has been terminated, but would be restored under HB 429. And then it also gets big government out of wind farms. Right now there is bureaucracy, additional layers of bureaucracy and burdensome regulations that have frozen the wind power entire industry in Ohio. There's been no new additions of utility scale wind in Ohio in years because the targeted regulations keeping them out of the state. Rep. Brent, anytime you want to, I want to make sure you have an opportunity to add anything if you want at any point.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's kind of back to the previous slide too, that when we talk about equity within itself, if living particularly in Cleveland, you are disproportionately more likely to have effects of bronchitis, of asthma, of eczema, because of the air quality we experience. And even I, as a small child, had cases of bronchitis. And thank goodness for good healthcare, I don't suffer for that anymore. But because of those inequities within our system, there are so many people who are disproportionately affected. Even how we decide on where highways are. Cleveland just added a highway in the middle of Cleveland, in the middle of homes. It's not any type of barricades. So you add on to different things like that that mess up our air quality. So the Energy Jobs and Justice Act addresses those type of things because no one should have to be concerned that their child or their mother or anybody else that they love and care for, even for themselves, should be affected by us not taking care of environmental justice.
Fantastic point, Rep. Brent. I mean, you know, we're not talking as Rep. Brent said earlier, it's not a them, it's an us issue, and it manifests itself in literally like more children having difficulty to breathe and more, you know, skin conditions and more, you know, significant life altering or, you know, life potentially shortening conditions when exposed to this over time. It is not fair. Right. So that's a great perspective that Rep. Brent brings to the conversation here. So one area I mentioned with HB6, the corruption that enabled it, and it went right to the top with the governor's, his director of legislative affairs, who was a first energy person who now I called for Rep. Crossman and I and others called for him to go, and he is gone now. So we took care of that one. His chief of staff is still, connected to the industry. And so is her family. And then the PUCO chair again is awaiting, potential legal implications for taking a bribe to move forward. So, and then the funds that were used to keep candidates like me out of office by Larry Householder, millions and millions of dollars in dark money, all were, infiltrated the system and got us this terrible, terrible policy that we're paying for $12,000 every hour. So this Energy Jobs and Justice Act would work on transparency and fight corruption by strengthening Ohio's investigative ability into utility companies. It would create more stringent requirements for people serving on the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio. So we would stop having industry people just move over and sit on that commission. And additional safeguards for consumers, for you, for rate increases, and require that you're paid back when charges that you've been paying have been ruled unlawful, so that Ohioans are made whole through that process. And also require transparency on your bill so you can see where your money's going, right? And that is incredibly important to safeguard us against this happening again.
It's interesting with Weinstein that I literally, during this process of learning about HB6, it made me start being more aware of my utility bills and all the different little things that we have to pay for. When we look at our bills, normally you just pay for it. You just pay for it. You don't think too much of it, all the things that are on there. But now this bill is really saying, like, we need to know what is on these bills. It is vital that people know what's on the bill and just the education behind it. And so we are just really telling people, like, it doesn't have to be a secret. The veil is being removed from what's going on when you are paying your bills at home. So that's one of the things, like it's a lot of things in this bill that I love, but the education piece and the transparency of it is vital. And that shouldn't even be something we have to fight for. That should be something that's given. And so as we talk about different things on this bill, it's crazy that in 2022, we have to fight for transparency for people to know what's on their bill. And people should still be outraged. And the fight still continues when it comes to HB6, even though Rep. Weinstein and I, we're just discussing about householder being removed. There are still some bad characters who are still at the State House, who are still elected to office appointed to different positions, who've been hired. They are still there, and our state is still paying, what is that, like $291,000 a month for this. So please stay tuned and make sure you are doing what needs necessary to fix this.
All right. So talking a little bit more specifically to the justice parts of this bill, you know, instead of just creating a blanket policy, we actually wanted to take the care to specifically look at directing resources and help to communities that are disproportionately impacted, as Rep. Brent eloquently laid out. So this establishes an Office of Energy Justice specifically empowered to look at those metrics and that data to ensure that we are making progress for those impacted communities going forward. Directing resources to structural, historical, institutional barriers faced specifically by BIPOC workers and contractors. And then it actually puts dollars into those communities to help bring them into this industry and give them an opportunity from a training perspective, from a small business and a jobs perspective, to have access to it, to be able to impact their community while driving economic benefits into it. So we call it a just transition, but we think it's time that instead of sending billions of dollars, you know, out of state, did I mention $12,000 a minute? Going to this Indiana coal plant, that we start to direct that into the communities in Ohio that need it the most, and specifically incubate new jobs, new programs, and ultimately directed and targeted benefits to those communities. So that is a very specific way that we're going to direct investment there.
These incubators, there's going to be 15 of them, are so vital. We are still living with the effects, I like to call the residue of the pandemic. And we know the job market is changing. Those same jobs that people were doing before the pandemic are becoming obsolete. And so what we are trying to do, Rep. Weinstein and myself, is that we're trying to get people ready for the market of not just today, but of tomorrow. And energy jobs are the jobs of tomorrow. They're going to be well-paying jobs that you're going to have around forever. These are jobs that we're going to need forever within our system. So having these incubators, these workforce programs are so vital, because we are telling people that this is the job of the now and of the future. And so I'm just really excited. We have, I think it was like 103,000 people who are currently in this workforce, but this would be an opportunity to bring real jobs that people can go home and actually take care of their families with. It's not a minimum wage paying job, but jobs that have a livable wage. So I'm really excited about this. I might even have a third career on my hands after I'm not here to stay house and going to get me an energy job too.
Love it. I'm feeling that energy. I'm feeling it. Okay. All right. So how can we help with this bill? It is before the Public Utilities Committee right now, which is chaired by Jim Hoops. So we are trying to get hearings on the bill, and we will be back in the fall. So we hope, with the groundswell of support, that we have an opportunity to have this bill heard, and both proponents and opponents and potential amendments. I think it's great policy as it is, but part of the legislative process is taking all sides into consideration and improving a bill along the way. But we think we deserve hearings on this legislation. So this is, there's Rep. Hoop's email address to reach out to his office. And you can go to our tremendous resource, energyjobsandjustice.org, to get more resources to stay engaged, stay in tune, and figure out how you can help elevate our message and push this forward. And then it's always a good idea to follow all these great people on Twitter. And so on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, that's my tag. Rep. Brent, I think that's your Twitter tag?
That's my Twitter, Instagram. It's the
Okay.
same thing.
Yeah, and Rep Brent live tweets and live grams our sessions. So she is a fantastic resource for a great follow, a really great follow. So yeah, Rep Brent, anything you want to add?
This is a people movement to get this done. And one thing I've learned over time is that we just don't elect people and walk away and expect people to do it. As much as I love working with my brother, Rep Weinstein, I know he can't do it by himself, and we definitely can't just do it by ourselves together. We need everyone. We need everyone's input. We need everyone's talents, gifts, times, whatever you have to get this done, no matter if it's sending an email, showing up to the State House and asking for a meeting with Reps Hoops to encourage for this bill to get some movement, or having a postcard night within your community because you paid for the postcards. We need everyone's effort to make this happen. We need public pressure. So, you see us doing this, and I know at this point, Rep Weinstein and I are, we've had webinars, we've done phone calls, we've done emails to our colleagues, we've doing it all, but we have to work like a fist and not a bunch of fingers. Each one of you guys are the fingers to that fist. And if I had to experience anything, a fist is going to hurt way more than a bunch of fingers by itself. We are that fist. And we can get this done together to change the lives of people. We only have one earth out here. And if we do not take care of this earth, the air quality, the soil quality, the quality of life for all of us will really be limited, particularly starting in our urban cores and moving out. And eventually everyone would be disproportionately affected, not just those in urban communities. So if we're looking for a bill that is going to help us get more jobs for people, because everyone's looking for a good paying job, make sure that the quality of life is being helped, and making sure we take care of this earth, because we only have one earth to live on. The Energy, Job, and Justice Act, House Bill 429, is what we need to be concerned on. So I just really thank everybody for this opportunity. I've really enjoyed working with Rep Weinstein. I've been looking for something to work on with him and I'm glad this is the opportunity for us to really work together.
Wonderful. Well, I am going to, on behalf of everyone here, thank you both so much for your leadership on this, for the time and energy that you have put into bringing Energy, Jobs, and Justice Act to where it is in the process, and for being with us today. And I just did drop into the chat. Anyone who has questions, this is your chance. If you have questions for the representatives, this is your chance to ask them. Drop it in the chat, and we will make sure that they get to your questions. But until then, I'm just going to kick things off a little bit for you. A lot of times, working in the legislature and having worked on these issues for a long time, we hear about the cost of enacting climate policies and clean energy policies. But I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about maybe the cost of inaction on climate policies and clean energy. What are we looking at if we don't start to move in the right direction?
Yeah, I can start with that. They, right now, all we have to do is take a step outside to feel the insane heat. The heat index up in Northeast Ohio got well above 100 yesterday. I think it was like 106, and that becomes dangerous to health. So we're talking about people's health at risk because of these heat waves. And one example that I like to talk about the cost, in addition to a massive potential health impact for people, is a moral cost and a financial cost, is our schools, many of which are old and were built before, not before air conditioning, but when it was cooler up in Northeast Ohio and we didn't need air conditioning. The climate has changed and we do now. And kids are being forced out of school in facilities that don't have air conditioning. So just the cost to outfit air conditioning, proper ventilation and air conditioning in schools is over $1 billion of cost in capital improvements that are needed to weatherize, modernize, and make our facilities more efficient and safe for our children while they're learning. The cost of inaction is far, 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 far outweighs the cost of targeted investments that could seed tremendous economic and growth and climate impacts. And then, you look at our agriculture industry, which is a massive industry in Ohio. It's getting wetter, it's getting more unpredictable, it's getting harder. We're having more invasive species that can survive now here that didn't used to. So there is a massive threat to the viability and reliability of our agriculture sector as well. So that's just two examples of tremendous costs that we will bear if we don't take action.
And this actual bill is only asking for allocation of $20 million. And when I say only, I know somebody at home like only 20 million. When we think about how much we spend for the Department of Natural Resources, which is 496 million, when we talk about the Department of Ag, which is 197 million, this is really a drop in the bucket. And believe it or not, Ohio is in a surplus. We have $1.5 billion that us legislators have not assigned to anywhere when it comes to where that money is being assigned. 1.5 billion. We also have $3 billion in our rainy day fund. We are in a surplus as a state. Why aren't we taking care of our people? Why aren't we allocating this to at least $20 million for this to change the quality of life for all Ohioans right now? So when we say $20 million, if you're sitting on $4.5 billion, $20 million is nothing. It's really a drop in the bucket in comparison to what we spend in our different departments that are not addressing the same issue. So this is a thing of, if we really want to care about Ohioans, this is how we care about Ohioans, by developing this department within the state of Ohio.
And it is 10% of the bailout that we have given to OVEC and the Indiana coal plant. So, I mean, I might have mentioned $12,000 an hour is going to these plants. So that's $6,000. That's about $7,000 so far during this call of our money going out of state, so to a 1953 coal plant that can't remain in operation without us. I think we can find a better use for that money. Great question.
So I know we have questions in the chat, but you just led me right down the garden path on this one. Obviously, you all know what's been happening with AEP and the power outages that have been implemented in central Ohio and around the state, especially as you mentioned on days where the heat index is life-threatening, really, for a lot of people who don't have air conditioning. Talk to me a little bit about your reactions to this. What does this mean to you? How does this make you feel when you look at those $12,000 an hour? I don't know. I've heard you mention it once or twice, but then also, and what people are dealing with right now in the middle of all this.
Brent, I'm gonna.
I just say our environment is telling us that is not working. If you look at just even the changes, and Rep. Weinstein did a perfect example about how schools now have to be equipped with air conditioning. Our environment is changing drastically right underneath our nose, where the seasons are becoming very extreme. So in the sense of now, they're expecting to have a very hot summer. Who would ever thought we'd be sitting here with 100-degree weather and the electricity going out? Things are not working properly. And that's because we have not done a good job of taking care of our environment. And this bill helps us refocus, so this will not be a continuous issue for the long term within our communities.
Yeah, I think Rep. Brent said it well.
Do you see any changes? This is a question from the chat, but as things like this are happening, do you see any changes in the opinions or the mindset of your colleagues, many of whom are across the political aisle, but is this resonating with any others in the General Assembly?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because there is a bailout repeal bill that actually has two Republicans on it. Rep. Lanise, who unfortunately is not running for re-election, but she is still serving this term and has been really good on this issue. And Rep. Stoltzfus, I believe, is the joint sponsor of that bill. And he and I don't agree on much, but we do agree that these bailouts, corporate bailouts, should not come at the expense. Shouldn't happen at all, but they certainly shouldn't come at the expense of Ohioans. And so they have a bill to repeal the bailout part of this policy, which is one of the most damaging pieces of it. And it's parked in committee as well. And I believe they've had a hearing on the bill, but I don't think it has advanced to a vote in that committee. And then we do have other piecemeal approaches. There is a bill that actually that Dave Leland and Bill Seitz, who has traditionally not been an ally for renewable energy that works on energy waste reduction and energy efficiency, but it's a voluntary bill. That's my understanding, and would not be nearly as strong as the standards that we had in place. And then we've got, we just actually passed a bipartisan bill to allow to prevent HOAs from preventing people from putting solar panels on their roofs. So now there are fewer obstacles to people being able to get solar panels on their roof, which is a good thing. And then there is I believe there's a bipartisan community solar bill as well that's currently working its way through the legislature. So there are bipartisan efforts on this front. Rep Brent and I think we need an actual policy and an actual, overarching strategy. Not to say that we wouldn't, I wouldn't speak for Rep Brent, but not to say that we wouldn't be supportive of those bills. Yeah, but we need an actual policy moving forward. But those bills give me hope that we are going to take some steps in the right direction. I'd be more hopeful if the bills were like, if the coal subsidy bailout was actually moving to the floor for a vote, but there's obstacles preventing that right now.
And just to add on to it, we're going to talk about a couple elephants in the room. One elephant in the room is campaign finance and how people get their money, how PACs have to disclose information. People have to run for elections. Just like right now, I'm running for re-election, so is Rep Weinstein. But because of that, this has controlled the process on how we deal with environmental justice. The big money was in those big coal plants, and they were given out, they were making it rain on a lot of legislators. Trust me, they are not friends to me. They are not friends to Rep Weinstein. And so we were not benefiting ever from the circumstance, but there are a lot of legislators who benefited from these votes. Let's call a spade a spade. And because people benefited from these this votes with cash, not cash money, but checks, big checks, cash, like maxed out checks, like 13,000 in money. That's how a lot of these votes occurred. Not because people believed in the policy, not because they had this conviction, it's because there was money tied to the vote. And we have to really look how we deal with campaign finance, or this will keep on happening to a lot of things, no matter if it's our schools, no matter if it's when it comes to our healthcare. A lot of things are tied to money when it comes to politics. And we deal with that elephant in the room that will address a lot of things that are happening right now that makes no sense and it does not align with what the people want.
So while the Energy Jobs and Justice Act may not specifically deal with campaign finance, it does have transparency and accountability provisions. And could you talk a little bit more about those, especially in light of the fact that we know the kind of undue influence that money in politics has had with the chairman there, with the former chairman, Sam Randazzo, and just a lot of other questions about how some decisions were made at the PUCO. What do you see in this legislation that will help to make sure things like that don't happen again?
Yeah. Happy to take that. So specifically, the legislation creates performance-based regulation of public utilities. So utilities are given incentives for meeting goals that are actually in line with the health and wellness and the bill of Ohioans and the bills that we're paying. So if they hit those performance-based targets, they win, and Ohioans are winning too. It also requires that utilities file a rate case if they intend to increase rates through something like grid modernization or smart meter programs. So traditionally, in the past, they've had these programs and then not actually spent the money on modernization or efficiency. They just throw a fee on your bill and money goes into a slush fund, sometimes channeled back into politics. And as Rep Brent says, we get more bad policy out of it. So requiring them to file a rate case if they intend to increase rates will create transparency. It'll be an open process, and it'll make very clear what the costs are to Ohioans before it's approved. So those are three. And then the Office of Energy Justice also ensures that we'll have ultimately a seat at the table in discussions about how our energy policy and moves into our energy infrastructure. And we'll be able to share how different communities are impacted from the decisions that PUCO makes.
Great. Well, let's move over to the equity question for a moment. We have a question in the chat that says, what in this bill will provide for equity in energy jobs from an energy company point of view, such as companies that have the capability to facilitate large-scale solar projects or smart city projects? So I don't know if either one of you want to take a stab at that, but let's talk a little bit about the equity jobs provision that currently in the legislation.
So it's going to specifically, when you talk about those incubators, the workforce development is going to specifically go towards the neighborhoods that are being disproportionately affected right now, and go target those communities and say like, hey, we not only want to help make the community better when it comes to this bill, we also want to help train people to get ready for this too. So it's helping people with jobs, good paying, livable wage jobs in the communities that have been disproportionately affected. And that's how we bring equity to the circumstance.
All right, that sounds great. Well, obviously, if you haven't had a chance to drop a question into the chat, we would invite folks to do that at this time. I wanted to go back maybe from a little bit of a more personal note and just ask, and I know you've talked a little bit about this through your presentation, and it's pretty obvious to hear your passion from both of you on this, but why is this the right time for this bill to pass? Why is it important that we see this kind of legislation right now?
I just say, when we think about the basicness, and I'm gonna let my brother Weinstein finish it out, but your tax dollars should mean something. When we talk about thousands of dollars that are given away every month, you should be concerned. If I took $291,000 a month from you, most of us on the average people like us will be in the negative. But that's what we're doing every month here in the state of Ohio. We're taking your hard-earned money and we're giving them to these coal mines, one that doesn't exist here in our state. We are coming up with bad policy to make it hard for our communities that are disproportionately being affected. If you are concerned about your baby cousin that has asthma, if you're concerned about the eczema that you just can't shake and you keep on having to go to your dermatologist, if you're concerned about the quality of our soil, the water, if you're concerned about these hot days and why Columbus is basically without power, then you should be concerned about this bill. Everybody's being affected. And I keep on looking at Brent Weinstein's 3 kids. They are the cutest. You should definitely go check out his social media. But this bill doesn't just help us for today, but it makes sure that they have a great opportunity for tomorrow. I don't want to see his kids down the road having to fight the same battles that we are fighting right now and make our state long-term poor because people do not want to stay here. People do not want to work here and thrive here. I want Brent Weinstein's kids to stay here. I want them to be able to take over this state and know that we left it in good hands so they can even do better than what we have right now. But we can't do that without policy like this. We cannot. And that's why this has become a we effort and not just a you or I effort. This is a us effort on why we need to get this done.
Well said, and she's right. I do have the cutest kids for sure. There's no doubt. I might be biased. Yeah, look, we're at an inflection point in terms of the cost benefit here. If we invest and engage now, the benefits are so many. I mean, look at the American Lung Association rates Ohio air quality as among the worst. We get F grades, 7 of our largest counties do. And we're talking about the air our kids are breathing, the air that we're breathing. What is more fundamental than the air we're breathing? I mean, I think it's our most significant responsibility that we focus on those things, that our constituents see, touch, eat, drink, that we keep them safe. And we have an opportunity now at a minimal cost to create huge benefits in health, in the economy, and in our environment. If we just have the boldness to act. If we don't, the benefits reduce over time and the costs go up. So now is the time to do this. My kids, speaking of them, 2 of them have childhood asthma and have inhalers for days like today. Hot, poor air quality days, when they cough more, or literally for me, I see it in my home, like they're having a tougher time breathing on days where the air quality is worse. And that is our most fundamental responsibility, one of our most fundamental responsibilities. So we need to act now. Go no further than your front doorstep, or step outside of your home, and you will see, this is not normal mid-June weather that we're experiencing here, and human health is on the line ultimately. So we need to act.
Absolutely. You both mentioned coal plants in your last answer, whether it's reducing harmful carbon emissions, closing of coal plants, subsidizing coal plants. But is there anything in the Energy Jobs and Justice Act that would help those communities where coal plants are closing?
Yes, we do have. So I know there is a part of the bill. Yeah. So I want to make sure I get this accurate. These in HB 429, communities would be helped, like, for example, the Kiger Creek Power Plant in Eastern Ohio, where there are significant jobs associated with it. So they would be connected to state resources and investments through the bill to ensure that if those plants shut down, they would have state resources to help them in education, training, looking at different job opportunities. Some of the same resources that we're talking about through our incubators would be targeted investment in those communities to give them ramps toward more sustainable, clean energy jobs that are actually growing, as opposed to coal jobs, which are shrinking dramatically and are vastly outnumbered by clean energy jobs in our state. So it gives them a ramp into that new industry.
That's great.
Oh, I'm sorry. There is a community transition closure fund. I want to make sure folks know that. So it's actual investment that goes to, what we call a just transition, helping those communities transition from being coal-based to getting into solar and wind and geothermal and storage and all these great growing industries that we're going to help turbocharge.
All right, well, speaking of those industries, there is a question in the chat. How does this bill help small businesses and entrepreneurs get started in the clean energy field by accessing vital funds?
So we have the Business Accelerator program that people will be able to access through this. And actually, with any type of bill, we set it up, and then the rules will actually be determined on how that would look like when it's being filtrated. But it would be something set up for businesses to be part of this program who are interested in environmental justice.
Right, that is great. Well, we're getting close to the end, but before we go, I just feel the need to ask, what do you need from us? What do we have to do to make sure that this bill can be successful? If it's not in this General Assembly, in the next General Assembly, what do those of us who are, part of this presentation today in the audience, but any Ohioans, what can we be doing right now to help you advance this policy?
Well, follow us, elevate the message, talk to your friends, get folks to vote for candidates, put them on record on, where they stand. There you go. I'm getting that agreement. Talk to your candidates in this election coming up and ask them where they stand on clean energy and the Energy Jobs and Justice Act and renewable energy and efficiency and human health. Put them on the record and make sure your friends and folks, we all have the ability to reach them, that this matters and this is where folks stand on it. And then, at the same time, we had the link up earlier to contact the chairman to get more hearings for this bill. So help us elevate the message, hold those candidates accountable, and help us push the bill forward.
Representative Brent, anything to add there?
Well, we're going to have to keep doing it and doing it and doing it. Everybody always knows that one annoying person that keeps on doing something. He's like, why do they keep doing that? They're getting on my nerves. Well, we need to become those annoying people that keep showing up, they keep sending emails, they keep sending text messages, that just keep doing it to the point where they just feel like, oh my goodness, if we don't do something, they're going to keep bothering us. Your life, your future, your family, your community is dependent upon you being that annoying person. I support you being annoying, only about this particular House bill, not other things in life. But be annoying, be consistent by showing up, sending emails, sending postcards, and just keep doing it. Once is not enough. If you send one email, if you send another one, okay, maybe you deserve a hug, a social distant hug. But if you do it 5, 6 times, you deserve a whole cookie, a vegan cookie. But because we have to stay on top of this. We have to stay on top of this. And I encourage people, if you know people's addresses at home, send it to these people's houses. We are all at home till November. Find these people, send it to their homes, send it to their offices, send it to these people's church. I don't care what you need to do. Do whatever you need to do legally. Do it legally. Don't do anything illegally. But send it legally to them and keep sending it. Keep doing it. If you need to do post every day and tag them to something, post it every day and tag them to it. Just keep doing it because our lives are dependent upon it. And we have to take the shame out of being consistent about these issues. So once we take that shame out of it, and people are like, well, I don't want to feel like I'm bothering somebody, but there should be bothering you. They're bothering you every time they use these tax dollars. They're bothering you every time they're not taking care of our environment. They're bothering you every time Weinstein's kids have to use their inhalers for days like this. So you need to be that nagging person to get this done.
Well, you are in luck. We have a whole audience full of annoying people who feel very strongly about this issue and have been looking for that encouragement that it's okay to continue to push. Because if they don't hear from us, then no action is ever going to happen. I really appreciate you both being part of this. I encourage everyone who's with us today to visit energyjobsandjustice.org. If you haven't already, to the website, there's information about the legislation there. There are ways to sign up so that you can stay involved and get more information if you wish to start, contacting those legislators. There's also a way on the website to directly contact your lawmakers if you want to help spread that message. So we would encourage you to do that. And then again, social media, the Energy Jobs and Justice platforms are at EJJ Ohio. You can follow them on Facebook and on Twitter. And we encourage you obviously to get involved in any way that you feel comfortable that is legal, but that makes a difference. With that, I am going to close things out and thank you both and turn it over to Chad, who is going to wrap things up for us today.
Thank you so very much. Both representatives, you all are awesome for making this happen and being here today with us and helping to spread this vital message. Just want to say thank you again to everyone that has attended. We are meeting again on the third Thursday of next month. I believe that is the 21st. And we're going to have Miss Cooper from Moms Clean Air Force and Kindred Moms presenting connecting the dots between climate and health equity. So you don't want to miss that either. And if you are in the Zoom, please make sure you fill out the survey that was put in the Zoom not too long ago, and it's being put in. Again, we need your feedback so we can keep making these opportunities more robust and even more eventful in coming days. Again, Representative Weinstein, Representative Brent, it is a pleasure to have you all with us, and we can't wait to have you back again talking about these important issues. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And Tracy, what a fabulous job you have done once again in hosting and making this possible. Thank you. And so the rest of the Ohio Equity team, you all are great. Let's keep on doing this great work. Our guest, thank you again, and have a very great day. Goodbye.